All right, so we'll be getting started here in a couple minutes, and we'll be showing primarily Cubase Pro 8 tonight. Then we'll make sure everything is, so we're going to let some people get logged on. And if you guys want to, feel free to introduce yourself. We can do that, and this will be available to watch offline as well after the meeting. So you can watch it then, or you could watch it live. And if you have questions as we go along, you can please feel free to kind of ask in the comments field. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes, see if we get some people logging in. All right, good to see you, Jake and Daryl. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of show you some of the new things to get you up to speed. Good to see you, Juan, from San Diego. All right, so for those of us that are kind of watching offline, we usually get started maybe about 5 minutes into it, so we'll let some people get logged in. So maybe just a couple more minutes. And if you guys have particular questions about Cubase Pro 8, we see some people that have it kind of already. So you might have just a couple questions. We'll try to cover most of the stuff, but if there's something in particular, we can definitely go through that as well. We'll try to kind of do kind of more of a typical presentation than a Q&A thing this month, since it's a new release. But if you have particular questions, we can make sure that we cover those during the presentation. Okay, so we'll go over the Groove Agent SE. See that question from Jake? And for those of us that, if you want to go ahead and just do a quick introduction, I see we have Jake, Daryl, and Juan. Okay, we should have some more. I'm going to be working on some more videos over the holidays, but yeah, there's a lot of great tutorials already available. So I'm glad that you found them useful. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Can you guys hear me okay? I'll play just a little bit of audio. Just as a quick test. So let me know if you hear that okay. All right, Duan from St. Louis, good to see you on. Okay, and once again, if you want to just really quickly introduce yourself and kind of say where you're from, that'd be helpful. It's always interesting to see for me. All right, and once again, just a couple minutes, we'll get some more people logged in. I see more people kind of logging in. We haven't even started yet, and someone already gave us a thumbs down. Interesting. All right, we'll wait just maybe about 2 more minutes, get some more people. Thanks for logging on, Renato from Brooklyn. All right, Tyler from Salt Lake. All right. Greg from Seattle. All right. One of my favorite cities. All right, so maybe 1 more minute and we'll go ahead and get started. And if someone wants to actually kind of either during the clinic or during the presentation or afterwards, if they want to do kind of a summary of like what times particular topics were covered, and we could submit that into the user fields. I know we've had some users do that in the past, and it's really helpful for people looking for specific topics. So if you wanted to, if someone wants to do this live or during the presentation or afterwards, we could do that. All right, you see Doug from Charlottesville, Virginia. All right, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I'm based in Northern Virginia, so. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we just, on December 3rd, we announced and released the next generation of Cubase. So there's kind of 3 different levels of Cubase that we sell. So there's a Cubase Elements, and that's still at version 7. We have Cubase Artist 8. And what we used to be called just kind of plain Cubase is now called Cubase Pro 8. So there's a significant number of new features, but one of the things that you may notice when you kind of first boot it up and start running it is that it seems much more responsive, much more snappy. So there was a lot of performance optimizations under the hood. So you're going to see some pretty significant performance increases. We've heard from a number of composers that are running templates in excess of 1,800 tracks that their performance meter is going down by 60% with, from the same project in Cubase 7.5 to Cubase 8. So I think if you were to make an analogy, it's kind of like taking a beautiful old home and then kind of redoing the foundation, gutting it, doing all the new electrical, new plumbing, new floor joists, all that stuff. And just kind of, while you still have kind of the same appearance of the same home, internally it's kind of much more up to date. So that's kind of what they've done. So one of the things that we wanted to do was a lot of workflow enhancements. So if I wanted to make things just kind of easier and faster, there's a lot of those things built in. So we have some dockable elements here. So we see what we call rack zones. So if you wanted to enable the rack zones, you could just simply turn it on here. If you go to the setup window, at this point you could just kind of click here, or you could just hit Alt or Option T. Now you can see 2 different elements within the rack zone. So you can see not only your VST instruments, but your media bay right here. So if you actually wanted to see and load up particular instruments, all you'd have to do is literally just kind of drag over. So you can say, oh, okay, I want this instrument, and that will automatically, once I drag an audio file or a VST instrument preset, that will load up that particular instrument directly onto the track, and at that point load it into the instrument rack as well. So it gets to be kind of very easy for drag and drop, and now we could actually see all of your available instruments. So on PC, you could open and close it by hitting Alt T, and Alt Control T will switch back and forth between the media bay and the VST instruments. A lot of different elements can be placed in the inspector here. So, and as feature sets have grown, such as the chord tracks, track versions, so has the number of inspector elements. So if I wanted to come here, and if you wanted to see multiple inspector elements, you could, what you had to do before is often, unless you had like a really large screen resolution, is kind of work with one or two of these elements open. But if I have multiple elements open, let's say I'll just open up all of my inspector elements here. We can now actually just kind of use your mouse scroll wheel. So if you just kind of move it, or you could actually just kind of scroll up and down to see all of your different inspector tabs. Now, once you have your inspector tabs, there's also a little setup window in the lower right-hand corner here. So you could actually pin different tabs so that you can have the tabs automatically open for particular ones. Now, all of us have a lot of different plugins, so we wanted to do plugin management. So we can see kind of our plugin information window that we've had from previous versions, but now we could go to our plugin manager. So as soon as I click right here under my device menu, at this point we could make collections. So you can see kind of our default collection. And if I wanted to have a new collection, I could just click on plus. And let's say I wanted this for working with a particular type of drums. So I'm going to say let's make an empty collection called drums. And then I'm just going to drag and drop particular plugins. They could be any plugins, third party or the included plugins. And we could just drag and drop these plugins. Now, we could also just kind of right click and make a new folder. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a glass of water real quick. All right. Sorry about that. So if we want to call this drums. And now if I wanted to make my own folder here, we could just drag and drop additional plugins here within a folder. So when I go to instantiate a plugin, we could just come right here. We go to our inserts. We can now see all of our collections. So we can organize the plugins exactly as you want to see fit. And within this, we see a question about enabling plugins. You could just kind of choose which plugins are in fact active or not active within the plugin manager here. And you could have different VST effects and VST instruments. We've also updated the workspaces. So if you wanted to have a set number of how all the different screens are laid out, we can just simply come here. And there's a number of workspaces that come with the program. So if I wanted to see my project, mix console, and channel settings, or if I wanted to see just a project minimal or the project in HD. Now these workspaces can either be set up to be global, so we could do it for every single window, or just for particular projects. So if I wanted to see just my score editor, I could just kind of click right here and I could open up the score editor. Or if I want to see the mix console fully laid out, or back to our main settings right there. And we could use our own keyboard shortcuts to access these as well. So very, very handy. And one of the things that's also changed, especially for Windows users, is Cubase has switched over to a multiple document interface. So instead of always having to switch between active projects here, you could just use kind of the Alt tab to switch between your projects, or you could do Control tab, Windows tab. So previous versions where you had to, sometimes when you opened up different windows and they would cause some, like maybe the project window to shrink a little bit, at that point you don't have to worry about that. So all of the kind of window handling has been kind of greatly improved. We wanted to make things much easier for working with large numbers of virtual instruments. So if I wanted to render, whether it's an audio part or an instrument part, I could just come right here. And if I select a virtual instrument, we could go to render in place, and I could just choose render. And there's some different settings we will take a look at. But what it's done is it's automatically rendered that MIDI virtual instrument part directly into an audio part, and even carried the color over and muted the original part. So if I want to do this for multiple events or multiple tracks, whether it's MIDI or audio, I could just select like 4 non-contiguous events here. And if I go to my render in place to the render setup, you have some different options here. So one is I could have it as a separate event, as a block event, or as one single contiguous event. We could also have it be completely dry, include the channel settings such as EQs, inserts, and channel strip, or we could do the complete signal path, which would also include send effects, or you could have the send effects, the complete channel path, plus the master effects. If we have multiple parts, we can mix it down to one track. If we have different effects that would kind of go beyond the actual length of the part, we could actually add a tail in seconds or bars and beats. And then we could choose to kind of mute the source events or keep the source events unchanged. Now, if I look at if I select a particular part here and we go to our render setup, we'll get some additional options where for kind of the post process, where you could also disable the source track, so that could free up memory and RAM for virtual instruments, or you could choose to just remove the source tracks entirely. So if you need to hand this off to someone who maybe doesn't have the same type of plugins as you, it's very simple. And the beauty of it is you don't have to set any locators. I could just come directly here, say render, and it's going to create the same events, place it directly underneath, carry the color over from the actual part, and at that point mute the original part. And we're just about done. So now we can see kind of our original parts here, and then just mute it and then render it as audio. So you can do that again for multiple MIDI parts, or if you have an audio part, like on this vocal part here, I just had many different edits where the compression was really kind of bringing out the breaths, and I've chopped it up and did all sorts of kind of clip-based volume. And instead of having 300 little parts, I could just render it as one contiguous part that has all the editing. So once again, it's placed directly underneath, carries a color over, and just kind of makes the whole process significantly faster and easier to kind of work with when you're dealing with large instruments. So the advanced rendering is very, very helpful. All right, we'll switch to another project. Just find the right project here. And one of the things that we also wanted to do is we see that we have, like within Cubase 6, they added the capability of doing audio tempo detection. So we kind of wanted to do this for MIDI tracks as well. So if I have a part that was performed in, let me just load up a different project here real quick, and you can still kind of do your window handling this way as well. But let's say we just want to do a quick tempo detection. Open up this project here. So let's say if I wanted to just kind of listen to just the piano part here, we're just going to start off. We'll listen to this one here. I think is maybe a better part to listen to. If we turn the click track on, so you see that the piano part isn't really lining up with the tempo of the audio. So if I wanted to, I could just select that MIDI part right there. And we'll choose from our project menu, tempo detection. So we'll say analyze. And now it's automatically kind of created a tempo for us right here. So now we listen to it. So as you can hear the different tempo changes. So very, very easy, very handy. So if you have someone that played a piano part in that's very rubato, all you'd have to do literally is just kind of select it, do the automatic tempo detection, and then you could have kind of the bar and beat grid aligned with the MIDI part, so the person doesn't necessarily have to quantize and kind of lose the natural feel. So you see a quick question about how we set up so you could just right click and render in place on the MIDI. So if you have the extended toolbox, all you'd have to do is just select it, right click, and you'll see render in place directly here, and then we choose render. I'm also seeing a question about the plugins. We'll go back, I think it's in the plugin manager, or if you wanted to disable particular plugins. So I think if you go here to your setup, you could choose kind of like your different path settings. And once you're here, all you'd have to do is literally just kind of choose which plugins that you didn't want to see within your list. And then you could just kind of click on, update. So you could just, once you come here, you could just delete just that particular plugin. So it's very simple kind of do that. Now, if we wanted to work a little bit more with our chord track, we've also done some work with the chord track to kind of make it a little more unique. Let me see if I have the project open up here. So we've introduced something called chord pads. So what this is going to allow you to do is it's kind of an extension of the original chord track. So just get this project, activate it. All right, so many of us have kind of played with version 7, something called the chord track. So if I wanted to just kind of play a particular drum pattern, we could just enter in some different chords to try out different ideas. So let's say I'll just take an existing, we'll start off with the drum beat. If I wanted to enter in some chords, we could just double click here and say, okay, I wanted to start maybe with an F chord. If you click on the plus sign, you could just add a chord to the next bar. You could, depending on your snap value, you could change that. And let's say I want to end with a C7 chord. Now, if you don't understand kind of like traditional music theory, or if you're looking for a chord to go between B flat and C, you could actually just double click on a chord and go to the chord assistant. Now you can actually have kind of a list where you could say, okay, what is kind of recommended chords between a B flat and a C7 chord? So it could give you kind of chords musically correct, and you can say, okay, by cadence or by common notes and different levels of complexity. So you could also say, okay, maybe it's a G minor chord is a good suggestion. But you could also look at it based on proximity. So what chords are kind of close harmonically to the B flat and the C7 chord, or you could also look at it in a circle of fifths. So you could actually just kind of try out different chord ideas like this. Now, something else that was really handy that was added in Cubase 8 is the ability to just kind of navigate to your different chords with these little arrow keys. So now you could just try out and kind of navigate very easily instead of having to resort to your physical keyboard's arrow keys if you wanted to. Now, if I wanted to turn this or actually just transpose these particular parts, you know, you can just kind of select the parts here, and we could do the info line. So as you actually just kind of select the info line here, if you want to just transpose, let's say the singer doesn't like this key, or they want it in a key of E. And if you want to literally take this and turn it into MIDI parts, I could just drag it straight down and it's turned it into MIDI parts. Now, some other things we could do is actually change the chord voicing. So I want to switch it to like a first inversion or to a second inverted chord. So very, very handy and very fast. Now, something that we can do also, say if I get rid of these chords, is now if I just had perhaps like a laptop setup and I don't have a traditional MIDI keyboard, we could have something called chord pads. So now we can just come here and I could want whatever instrument that I have selected. So I have my Rhodes selected here. So we could actually just load up and have different chord presets. And if I wanted to define a chord, I could say, okay, in this I want it maybe a B chord. So we'll say B, and you could just, if you want to have different tensions, or different chord voicings here, we could just say, okay, with inversions. So very easy to kind of try out new ideas that you may not think of. otherwise. Now, you could also, once you're here on a chord pad, just choose to try different chord tensions. Or if you wanted to just do different chord voicings where it's the same chord, but just voiced differently. And you could choose the guitar voicings for piano or for guitar player. So you could actually just kind of choose your different chord voicings. Now you may notice that these other chords are kind of changing. So if I just switch these to not be on adaptive voicing, we could just kind of right click here and we could take adaptive voicing off. So you can see that those chords won't change based on the tensions or the chord voicings. Now you may notice that these look mysteriously like a piano keyboard, like C, C sharp, D, E flat, etc. So we could just trigger these from your piano keyboard. So if I wanted to just kind of play just a quick chord progression, I could just hit record. And then you could just try out different kind of chords. So it's kind of very simple. Now, if you didn't want just kind of a traditional block chord, you could actually just load up. If you go to different players, you could try out different patterns. So as we hit our chords, we can say, okay, let's do just kind of a, instead of a block chord, or if you wanted to, so that would just do a quick arpeggiation of the chord. We could also, if we have an existing part here, let's say if you have a MIDI part, let's say if you wanted to do something like a guitar voicing, so say we just kind of solo this guitar track. I could just drop that MIDI part directly onto my player here. And I could say, let's make this for guitar. And as we kind of do this, I could say, okay, pattern, we drop the MIDI part. And now I'm going to open up my virtual keyboard here. And I could just kind of trigger the chord pads using my virtual keyboard. So we're going to select our nylon guitar. So it's a very easy way to kind of just try out different chord ideas. And you say, okay, let's make it for guitar or for piano voicing. Or if we have like a string part, we could just choose to actually import MIDI loops, and you get tons of great MIDI loops with Cubase to start with. So now I could just come here and so if I wanted to just record that, I could just, again, just place record, and using my virtual MIDI keyboard or any MIDI keyboard. And then just kind of hitting just keys on my computer keyboard, I could just play kind of string parts like that. So you can kind of drag and drop existing parts, or you could actually use many of the supplied MIDI loops. Now, if I wanted to populate the chord track kind of based on actual parts here, I could actually just right-click. Let's say we have a piano part here, and I could go to my chord track, and we could choose to create so we'll just come right here and we'll say let's create chord symbols. And what we could do is an analysis of this piano part, and if I just again come right here, we'll say okay, let's go to, and again we can see kind of our chord assistant. So we're going to try out different ideas, but you could also choose to load up presets. So you can load up presets, or if you come here we could just say let's just assign pads from the chord track. So now I'm going to just assign the pads, and we go to look at it, and now I could just have. Or if I just wanted to listen to it on my Fender Rhodes part here. Now, what else is kind of interesting is you have the ability to take our chord pads here, and we could do some other interesting things. One is a pad layout. So if I wanted to see not just one octave, but we could actually have a keyboard and have it be set to 2 octaves. So we can see that. Or if you wanted to see more of a grid, we could say, okay, I want 4 rows, 16 pads, and now I could just kind of trigger these kind of more of like an MPC style. And if I really like that particular layout, all you'd have to do now is just come over here, and we could actually just save that as a preset. So we'll call it guitar voice. And now you could just try out and kind of load between different presets that you like. So if you know kind of a generic kind of guitar strumming pattern that you've created that you want to use, just kind of audition different ideas, we could do that very easily. Now, once we have this kind of set up, we could also just do some other creative things with it, because we could have kind of an extensive MIDI control. So I'm just going to erase this existing part on our Fender Rhodes here. So, and we could choose to actually have remote control, and we could have MIDI notes that actually switch the tensions or just switch the, the chord voicings, or actually just transpose. So if we watch here on my virtual keyboard, I'll just say we're going to take, I'll play just. So I'm just going to transpose here. So if you watch my F chord here, and I want it to go up, I could just hit a MIDI note. I want to do. And we'll say, let's make this for piano. And we'll go back to our setup and say, okay, we're going to grab our players, and we'll just say, let's load up that preset that we have here. Or even if I just do playing chords, I could actually just kind of do, if I wanted to do different chord voicings, just hitting the C sharp there. Or if I hit the E flat, we can go up to different tensions. So one MIDI note can change the tensions. Other MIDI notes can change the voicings. And then I could transpose with other MIDI notes. So if we go back, let's say to original, we'll go back to say our pattern, and we'll load up our guitar voice and hit record. So I'll just blow out some of the chords here that's playing with already. So, and we hit record. So you can try out kind of different chord ideas too. And then instead of having to play it all from a piano, if you just want kind of a creative way of finding new chords that you may not find otherwise, it's very handy with kind of the proximity and circle of fifths. So you could actually kind of realize kind of new ideas, because it's really easy to kind of get stuck in chord progressions as ruts. But this way, even if you're kind of more of a drum programmer and you want to see it laid out in a grid, or if you wanted to see it just triggered from pad layout from a MIDI keyboard, you can have kind of all these different tensions, be able to kind of take the chord track to the next level. So very interesting concept to be able to do a lot of different components there. Now, one of the things that we've also incorporated was, in addition to Groove Agent SE with the Acoustic Agent. So we'll just open up a project and show that. So Groove Agent SE came in version 7.5, and it's been augmented with the Acoustic Agent SE. So it used to be that the Groove Agent SE was really kind of more geared towards like hip-hop and EDM production and kind of drag and drop sampling type of drum programming. So if we wanted to have a little more control and have more acoustic sounding kits, you could just kind of come right here and load up the Acoustic Agent. So you can see that we're going to have kind of a full drum kit here. So now what's kind of interesting about this also is if I just kind of click on the pad here, let's say I'll just play back a pattern. So we get 16 patterns, and they're kind of broken down for the Acoustic Agent, where you have 2 intros, 2 endings, 8 patterns, and 4 fills. So I'll just kind of hit play here. We'll go ahead and just turn this up just a little bit. So if I wanted to just kind of take the instrument here and say, okay, I want the kick to be more in the room mic, or I wanted to tune the snare. Anytime that you select and you see this little yellow circle around different elements, all you have to do is that is selected, and that's what you can edit. So if you want to edit the attack, so you want more like almost a stick sound, or you want more attack, or more into, you know, the overhead mics, less into the overheads. We're going to take the hi-hat here and kind of have the hi-hat more open or closed. You could adjust to all those different things. And now what's kind of really interesting about it is you could also have different MIDI effects. So if you want to take this and just add like a little bit of rudiments, you could actually kind of select just a snare and say, okay, I want like a flam. And you could adjust the timing of that. Or you could add different MIDI delays. So if you want the delays to go up in pitch. So you can do a lot to kind of really kind of enhance the sound. So it's obviously kind of a great sounding drum kit with this. So you have instrument layers as well as pattern layers. And with the instrument layers, you can have up to 128 different sounds, but you have 16 patterns. Now, if I really like this particular pattern, you could have different, you could change the pattern so it's not playing back the same thing over and over again. So I'm just going to have a very kind of simple pattern here. And if I, let's say, just move, let's say I switch to a different pattern, or if I wanted drum fills, now if I wanted the pattern to get softer, I could just move this little dot here down, and we can control the dynamics or intensity. Or if I wanted the pattern to be more complex, I could just slide this over to the right. And you can mix and match any patterns with any of the kits as well. Now, one of the things I've seen people sometimes having a hard time is finding where all the Acoustic Agent kits are. So one of the things to be aware of is kind of as you're doing this, let me just make sure I don't have any of my MIDI effects turned on here real quick, is that when you go to load the kit with the patterns. So each kit could have different patterns and different processing. By default, it may kind of look like this, and sometimes it could be hard to determine what is kind of a more of an electronic kit, or if you want to find all the acoustic agent kits, if you just click here in the lower left-hand corner, you could open up the filters, and now you could just kind of choose to see all the different acoustic kits right there. So just a quick handy thing to be aware of. Now, once you're here, we could also see kind of the mixer. So if I want to take just this pattern, I could take my kicks, and I want my kicks or my snare to be louder. We could have multiple outputs that you could just kind of enable by clicking right here. So you have 16 stereo outputs. We could also have all of your different auxiliary sends. So if you want to add, let's say we have reverb on send 1, I can now go back to my snares here, and if we want to add more of that reverb. Now also, each channel that you select has almost a full channel strip. So we could have 4 bands of parametric digital EQ. We could have full compression, tape saturation, as well as an envelope shaper. So if you say, okay, I want my kick to have a little more gain and more length. Or if you want it to be kind of less attack on the kick. Now, since we actually can trigger each of these notes via MIDI, we could actually see the little MIDI note right here. So if you wanted to actually just record a MIDI note, you could just simply record that note, hit that note anywhere in your sequence, and it's going to trigger that pattern. So when we get back to our patterns, we could also, when we go to edit the patterns, we see this little icon here. So if I really like this pattern, I could say, okay, we're going to take this for our verse, and then we'll repeat that a couple of times. Just hitting Control D to duplicate. And then I can say I want a drum fill. Following that, going right back into a variation of that. And you could just have all of your drum parts just kind of laid out for you that easily. So you could just drag and drop your different parts. So if you wanted to edit these particular parts as well, you could actually now, when you go to like your drum map name, you could automatically create the drum map from the instrument. So as soon as I do that and I double click, we can now just go directly into, it's going to launch our drum editor, and we could see where our hi-hat is and what our kick is, kind of all laid out for us. So as you can see, just a great addition to the drum capabilities that come with Groove Agent SE 4 with 7.5, now adding kind of all the acoustic agent with that. Now, so something in kind of a similar vein that we wanted to do was we had a great sounding guitar amp with the VST amp rack, so really highly regarded amongst many engineers and producers. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to show a little bit of love for the bass players. So in Cubase Pro 8, we see the VST Bass Amp. So we'll just kind of take a quick listen to it so you get an idea. So this would be if you've worked with the VST amp rack, which is just, you know, a really wonderful guitar amp with 6 different amps and 6 different cabinets modeled. What's really great about this, it's kind of a very similar thing. We could have pre-effects, so we could see kind of all of your effects kind of at before the signal hits the amplifier. So if you wanted to run it through a compressor, there's also multi-band compressors. Or if you wanted to have like a real popular thing in studios for bass players is the Sans amp bass, the BDDI, the bass driver DI box. So you have something very similar to that. Or if you want to be running it through Magneto 2 for tape saturation. But you'll have 6 different amplifiers here. So you have one that kind of, this looks like an Ampeg to me. Maybe one looks like a Gallien-Kruger, Trace Elliott, an Eden, a Fender, an SWR. So kind of get the idea. And you have kind of classic different cabinets. So you have an 810, a 412, a 410, and a 115. You could also have different post effects here. So if you wanted to, again, kind of build up your whole pedal board, and we could just say, let's just grab, I want to add different chains of effects. We could do that. There's also 3 on-axis and 3 off-axis mic positions. So if you wanted to have 8 different microphones that you could choose from, so if you want maybe like a classic ribbon mic and a large diaphragm condenser, or maybe a large diaphragm dynamic microphone, and you could blend kind of between the line level and the mic signal, so you don't have to worry about phase issues. And you could also kind of have your configuration kind of showing the signal flow and kind of your entire output stage. So you can have an EQ, a tuner, and a master effect directly there. So as we kind of work with this, let's go ahead and just take a quick listen to some of the different presets. So we'll go ahead and just kind of bypass so you can hear. If we solo the bass part. So really nice, probably active sounding bass. And now we'll kind of kick on the Tube 300 model. So we'll bypass it here. So nice, but kind of a little sterile sounding, as most kind of DIs sound. And if I wanted to adjust the EQ, so you have kind of little rocker switches, just like the classic amps. You want to adjust, you have 2 mid-range frequencies, or adjustable. If you want to switch cabinets. If you want to add some of the classic kind of distortion of this amplifier. So you have that kind of natural bass amp overdrive and getting context. So kind of going from there to there. So let's take a look at the next model. So we'll just kind of, let's say maybe more of a kind of a classic. So we'll go ahead and bypass this model here. So let's say kind of a classic precision bass sound. So let's say we want to get rid of some of the honky mid-range. We can just kind of come here. And let's just add switch cabinets. So this is kind of so amp can really warm it up. So, and again, it's one of those things, like, you know, bass players generally work a lot with DIs because they're very convenient for the engineers, but they still love the sound of their amps. So we could kind of now allow them to kind of do that. So let's take a listen to say something where we want a little more mid-range perhaps to cut through. You have kind of a classic transistor amp here. If I want to go to my post effects, let's say I want to add a little more presence, more drive here. We bypass. Then we'll move on to the next amp model. A little more R&B, contemporary R&B sound. So we'll just kind of solo just the bass. And here we'll have a little processing of a chorus pedal. So soloed and now in conjunction. So even just, you know, we have people that often use kind of the plugins, you know, some of the amp models and don't run the amps and just use the pedals. to kind of get different sounds. So say you want more of a bit of a high-tech process sound, you take our unprocessed bass here. And here you can just kind of swipe between the pedal board. We'll move on to our last amp. So again, we'll just solo it dry. So again, a nice sounding bass, but not really exciting. I'll listen to it in context here. So as you can see, just a kind of a great instant fix to a lot of the particular problems that people run into with not having such great sounding bass tracks in their production. So instead of worrying about miking up an amp and the bleed through that it causes and worried about phase relationships between an amp signal and a DI signal, it's really easy kind of using the VST Bass Amp to kind of just have all that stuff perfectly dialed in for you. We've also updated kind of the mixing capability pretty significantly as well, and we've added some additional plugins. So if I wanted to, we'll just kind of jump here to our project. So we've always had a very, Steinberg invented the whole concept of VST instruments. So he said, let's just kind of literally just take a tremendous amount of this capability and let's do some groundbreaking things with it. So we've incorporated some additional new plugins, and we've updated some of our existing plugins as well. So one of them would be our multi-band compressor. And if you've dealt with a lot of multi-band compressors in the past, you realize that they often can impose a significant amount of latency for processing. So this is a multi-band compressor, so you could actually compress your individual frequency ranges here as you see fit. And what was new that's been added is the capability of individual side chaining for each frequency range. So if you wanted to have the kick drum be side chained from a different source that as the snare or hi-hat in a particular track, so you could do that. But most significant thing to me is this concept of the live mode. So if you turn that button on, and now the plugin is running in 0 latency, so you could actually print through the plugin, and at that point just have be able to actually record directly through the plugin and have that great signal on the way in. So it's by far, I think, the only multi-band compressor has 0 latency with that. So in this same kind of concept, we've also added the capability of a multi-band expander, again with a live mode. So if I wanted to come here, or this is the multi-band envelope shaper. So this way, if you have a drum loop, you can say, okay, I want the kick is a little too loose. We could tighten up the kick sound, but we want the snare to be a little longer and have more attack, and the hi-hat to be just tamed. So at this point, you could come right over here and have your multi-band envelope shaper. So this is a transient designer. So it's kind of a very incredibly powerful tool for kind of fixing drum tracks or for mastering. So, and again, with the live mode. In top of that, we could have a multi-band expander. So I'll just come here, and these will all be found under your dynamics tab. So we'll say, okay, let's open up the multi-band expander. So again, with the same concept with live mode, 4 bands, and independent side chaining. So again, we're allowing you to kind of coax a tremendous amount out of your mix. In the multi-band theme, we brought back kind of a classic plugin called Quadrafuzz, and this was, I believe, originally a Craig Anderton kind of do-it-yourself project that he wrote for a magazine article. And we did this as a plugin a number of years ago called Quadrafuzz. And it was basically a multi-band distortion where you have different amounts of distortion on every single band. But now we've kind of upped the ante quite a bit, so you could actually have 5 different types of distortion. So you can have tape, tube, distortion, amplifier, decimator. So you could have, if you want a tape distortion here, tube distortion on this band, decimator on this band, and just a distortion on this band. You could do that. Plus, each band could have its own independent delay. So this is really intended to kind of mangle and do all sorts of creative stuff. You could definitely use it for doing light, if you want to do some like really interesting saturation, tape saturation in different frequency ranges, you could do that very easily. Or if you wanted to just have like really cool sound design elements, great plugin for that. The de-esser has been updated pretty significantly as well. So if you wanted to adjust it very easily for male or female sibilant frequencies. And one other one that's been updated is the concept of having your tools, and we can say the tuner. So this will be working much better, and it's larger and easier to read, so it kind of looks now like your traditional rack mount tuner. So those are all kind of new plugin enhancements and additions in addition to the VST Bass Amp that come with Cubase Pro 8. So now one of the things that we want to do you could also see kind of in the actual kind of GUI, there's been some subtle but nice enhancements, like you can see kind of a higher contrast for stuff that you actually need to read, such as like the track names. So that's been paid attention to detail. One of the popular feature requests that we had for a number of years was to add a VCA style of automation for doing linking. So if we wanted to take a look at setting up different linking, we could just take this particular, let's just take this channel, and let's say I wanted to link all of my drums. I will select my drum tracks here. Okay, so there's kind of been 2 different types of linking, channel linking previously. So you could have a quick link. So if I have this, I could just select all my drums and then just move them up and down. And that's very, very handy, and you could just do that from hitting Alt plus Shift. So you could enable that with Alt plus Shift and just turn on quick link. So that's very handy. But sometimes if you had already existing automation, you could kind of sometimes, if you had it quick linked, you could kind of override the existing automation, and that could be problematic for some people. Now we also had a defined link group as well. So if I wanted to come here, we could go to our link page, and you could just say, okay, we want to define our link group. And it used to be with previous versions that you could, it would always be labeled like link 1, link 2, link 3, link 4, etc. So if you're doing really large mixes, it could be, sometimes I could hear a mix engineer, sometimes, oh, is that link group 13 or link 16? I can't remember. So now you could actually just type in a name. So you could just name your link group. And you may notice a new feature here called Use VCA Fader, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. But here, we could choose what elements of the channels we in fact do want linked. So if I wanted to just have volume and sends linked, I could choose that. So if I was doing maybe drums, I may want the volumes to be linked and perhaps routing to be linked as well. If I was doing background vocals, I may want volume and EQ and send. So if I adjust the send for one of them, that it would adjust it equally to all of the other channels. But you could actually kind of pick and choose exactly what elements will be linked here. Now, if we have a project that has some existing automation on it, this is where it gets tricky. So what a lot of people would do is to send all of their drum channels to a group. So if I just right-clicked here, we could create a group channel based on that. And then if I have my existing automation, we'll just add a group channel here. What you're able to do is to now just kind of take this, and you could drop the volume of this group, and all the automation for the actual channel is maintained. But this, if you do that, that will affect kind of the actual gain structure of some elements of the mixer, such as feeding your effect send. So if I drop my group volume, my group channel volume, all these automations are still completely intact, but the level that's being sent out to my effect sends is changed. So that affects the kind of wet-dry ratio of my effect send. So when we want to do this is where working with a VCA fader makes a little more sense. So this won't actually do any summing of the audio signals, but just kind of treats it as like a fader. So I'm going to select all my drum tracks. We'll right click and we'll say let's add VCA fader to selected channels, and it gets placed directly to the right of my channels here, and we can see that we don't have any of the additional signal flow processing. So if I wanted to just come right here and we'll just play our loop here, we see my existing automation. And as I move my VCA fader, even though my VCA fader is going down, the tracks can still go up and down independent of the actual VCA fader. So if I move it up, we can see some of the automation tracks going down. Now once I kind of have this set up, if I wanted to automate that, I could just click right here and I could write my VCA fader automation here. So now if I've written, in essence, kind of two levels of automation, the original track automation and automation that's been affected by the VCA. And when we kind of look at particular channels here, if we open up kind of our automation panel, you could actually see kind of two different automations that, you know, one can be set up for just the actual. So we come here, we can see two different dots. So one is the result of the VCA fader, and one is the result of the original channel automation. So when I go back to my mixer here, if we just select the VCA, we could actually just click, you'll see a little pop-up menu right there just to the right, and it'll say combine the automation of the VCA and the linked channels. So at that point, we now go back out to our main project window, and we can see that that's going to just combine those two different elements together. So makes it very, very easy and handy for that. Now, we could also, if I wanted to kind of blow out this link group, I could say, we'll just come here, we'll edit the link group, and we'll just say, okay, we just want to not assign a VCA fader. And it's going to ask us if we want to keep kind of our combined automation. We'll just say yes for now. And we'll choose one of our channels here, and we'll choose to unlink. And let's say I want to just make new links. So I wanted just a VCA fader for just my kick drums. So I'm going to say add VCA fader to the selected channels, and we'll do one for our snares and hi-hat. And let's do one for our toms. And we'll say for our room mics and tambourine. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to select just a VCA Faders. Just hold down the Control key. And I'll choose to add a VCA fader to those selected channels. So now when I go to write my automation, I can kind of see just my kicks or just my snare and hi-hat, toms. And if I wanted to affect everything together, so that gets to be like a really handy, very clever way. And sometimes people that have come from, and this is a paradigm that was kind of set up on large format analog consoles before flying faders were common, as a way of kind of being able to automate those particular parameters. So this kind of concept is still kind of very much in a workflow of particular engineers. So you kind of can now have kind of linked faders or group channels or quick link, whatever you want. Now I see a quick question about how do you save just a mix. So if you actually go up here into the right hand corner, you'll see like this little settings, and if you just click here, you could actually just choose, you could select all the channels and just choose to save the selected channels in the mixer. So if you wanted to kind of start all over and not lose everything that you just had, so again, just kind of navigate directly up here to the upper right hand corner, and then you could save the selected channels as a preset that you could call up at any time. So now something else that has been kind of enhanced within the Cubase Pro 8 was some additions to our channel strip. So where it makes sense, we could actually now just kind of click here and say, okay, we'll just hide all of our racks and we'll just open up our channel strips. And for those of you that haven't really played much with the channel strips, these are just incredibly useful because, you know, as you start working with a lot of plugins, you realize that you can only see so many plugins at one time on your screen. Now here's another question I've seen online a lot is, okay, I just want to see all of my VCA faders together. How could I do that? You could actually just come here and within your channel configuration, just choose none and then just say, okay, I want to see my VCA faders, and you could save that as a configuration if you wanted to just call up all your VCA faders. So, or if you wanted to see everything except your input channels and you want to hide your VCA faders from view in your mix console, you could do that as well. So within our channel strip, if I have a number of channels selected here, we could just come here and instead of opening up traditional plugin GUIs, we could say, okay, I want to have my noise gate, and I'll just quickly activate the quick link here. So I'm just going to add a noise gate to all these channels. So as we do this, or if you want to see you know, compression, and unlike traditional large format consoles, you can have 3 different types of compression. And now some enhancements, we could actually see the EQ settings. So we could see kind of your EQ channels. And now we also have the option of having under tools the de-esser or the envelope shaper. So the de-esser has been included now. And we could choose to have saturation and Cubase 7.5 added to Great Magneto 2 plugin. And then if I wanted to see just tape like a limiter, I could just come directly here. And if I wanted to hide one row, such as my EQ view, we could just kind of literally see kind of your whole console laid out for you. If I wanted to kind of change the signal flow, let's say, okay, I wanted the magneto before it hit the noise gate, we could just drag and drop and change that order. So, and you could have independent sidechain stages on the noise gate, compressor, and the envelope shaper if you want it. So some new additions there, and you could actually just save this as a configuration. So if you say, okay, let's just make this 1, and I wanted to see kind of a whole different routing control. Let's say, okay, I want to see, but this one I just want to see routing, pre, inserts, and sends. And I could save this as 2. Or you could call it whatever you want. So now with just a keyboard shortcut, you could just switch back and forth between these two different views. So if you wanted to be able to kind of see all your inserts and sends, so this way you can kind of manage large projects very effectively. Now, we see a lot of people when they're kind of working with EQ, sometimes having difficulty knowing what frequencies to actually apply EQ to. So, here if we go to our channel overview and we turn on a band of EQ, one of the great things is, we have kind of 4 bands of parametric EQ. So if I want to hold down like my shift key, we could adjust just the Q, how much gain. So if you hold down kind of your control key, you can lock the frequency. So now I can't change the frequency. Hold down the shift key, I adjust the gain. If you hold down the alt, you can't adjust the boost or cut. So you have some really handy modifier keys. But as we kind of do this, you may notice that we see a little display here, and we could actually see what note that we're EQing. So sometimes I hear a lot of people always talking about particular frequencies that they are working with. So they're, I need to EQ at 300 and 3K. And you realize that those frequencies are really kind of dependent upon the key of the song, kind of the frequency. So one of the things is you could actually see the pitch indicated here. But you could actually just come right here also and just in the frequency field, just type in. So say you're in the key of G for the song, you say, okay, make it a G2 frequency. And then as soon as you kind of just double click and say, okay, G2, hit enter, that will just automatically take you to that frequency. Or I want it to be A4. So we'll hit A4. And it just takes you to that frequency. So if you don't necessarily, I see so many people that have like posters that has a piano keyboard with a frequency, and they're always kind of referring straight to that. So now you have that capability of actually being able to determine the frequencies built directly into the system. So very kind of handy for finding that as well. So now one of the things that we've also added was the capability of working with something called direct routing. So we can see that we could have a lot of like routing capabilities where you could say this is my input and my output control. So if I wanted to right now have all my drums routed to group 1, so and as opposed to my stereo output. So if I wanted to select all of my drums again, just hold down my shift key. I could just say, okay, we're going to route these to my stereo output. Now, one of the things that's really handy is this concept that we introduced called direct routing, because a lot of people like to do parallel processing, where it's literally like they may just say, okay, we want to not, so we'll just come right over here. We'll say we'll hide our inserts, and let's go to our direct routing. So they may send like all the drums to one group and then send it to a second group. And often the second group can be very heavily compressed. And you see this with like lead vocals and drums are pretty common with this. So if I wanted to do that easily, sometimes that could be pretty difficult to actually set up. So one of the things I could do is I'm going to come right here and I'm going to just say, let's add a group channel to the selected channels. So I'll just hit add track. Okay, so we added that group channel, and I want to go back and let's add the group channel again to all of our tracks here. And we'll choose to, so right now these are all routed to group 2. So we'll add just one more group channel to select it. So now I have like some different group channels. So the problem sometimes is people often use like their sends to send out to different destinations. So I could use my send and send it to a group. But if we're using our sends for traditional effects, and we're using a lot of effects in an active mix, what's really handy is we can now just kind of take all of our drums here, and we could send these to different groups with our direct routing. So I'll say, let's take all those channels, and now we'll just enable the quick link, and we'll say we want this to go to group 2. So we have, let's say I want all these to go out of my stereo output. These are all going out of group 2, but I also want them to go out of group 3. And let's say I have my parallel compression there. So right now you see that we can only kind of send it on our direct routing to one destination. But if we go to our little setup window where we could save our mixer presets, we could also just enable direct routing summing. So I'm going to turn that on. So as we come here, we'll just say, okay, we're going to activate our direct routing summing. So we're going to send this to group 1 here. Then as we do this, we have, so now I could send to the same multiple destinations. We have up to 8 destinations. So as I play my drums here, and we'll say we'll have all of our automation going on. Their drums are routed out to this group, and I could apply my parallel compression directly there. So it's an easy way of kind of being able to route out to different destinations. Now, what else is kind of cool about this is, let's say as we kind of start our loop again, and I place all the tracks into record enable, is you could, as it's playing, to say, so you could actually automate these routing changes. So we'll see these kind of just kick on now. I've let go of the mouse. So now you could actually say, okay, during the chorus, I want parallel compression on the lead vocal to make it a little stronger. Or during the verse, I don't want that. So you could actually have kind of routing to your different destinations with direct routing without having to use sends. So it gets to be a very kind of creative way to work with those different components. I'll just revert the project here, just shows next feature. Now, one of the things that we always have had inside of Cubase Pro 8 is the capability, or inside of Cubase with 7, when we introduced the new mix console, was fantastic metering. So we have the control room section of the console, so we'll just kind of enable some of the functions of the console here. So as you're kind of going, we'll just kind of put this in a loop again. So if I wanted to kind of switch over to my metering, and version 7.5.2 added the capability where you could see the control room got enhanced visually a little bit, so you could actually see kind of a really obvious volume knob in addition to metering. So if I wanted to just hide my control room volume. Now what's kind of interesting about this is you have the capability to say, okay, I want to see different types of metering. So we have, I believe, 9 different types of meters, or 10. We'll take a look at one. So we're going to have full digital scale. So as we're kind of playing back the project, I could look at it in DIN scale, or EBU for European Broadcasting Union, or British scale, Nordic, or CAT system 20, 14, or 12. There's also a loudness meter here, which is if you're preparing something for broadcast, really handy, because this will deal with the new loudness units, or LUs, as opposed to dBs or VUs. So this will kind of, instead of having the discrepancy of peak metering versus RMS metering, you could just kind of set your levels here, and ideally you want it to be at about minus 23 LU for your peaks. So if I was doing something for broadcast, I could just kind of determine this, and we could see our momentary maximum set right here. Now all these meters are really handy, and we see meters here, and these could be customized as well. So if you wanted to go into your preferences, we could actually set different metering appearances. So you could say, if you wanted to make your own metering colors, we could do that as well. But the meters, all of the meters, regardless of how fancy they are or different types of scales, only show you what's just happened. So, but if I wanted to have a different type of meter, we could actually just right click in our meter bridge and choose wave meter. So here we could actually see what is going on in all the tracks. So we get 3 seconds before and 3 seconds after. So we go, oh, there's not a lot of actual data here. And you can see kind of where the snare is hitting, where the kick is hitting. And you go, oh, is there anything on this track? Should I just delete that track? You know, it's like, what's going on there? I see activity here. Oh, looks like there's a tom hit. And you can see exactly when that comes in. Plus, the most important thing is it just looks super cool. So all of your audio tracks, you could actually just see all of the metering just kind of being handled directly here. So very useful for seeing kind of what's coming up in your project with that. So great functionality for that. So a lot of great enhancements within the mix console itself. So you know, really kind of dive into it and check it out. Now, one of the things that was introduced in Cubase 7 was an ability to collaborate kind of in real time. I'm seeing all sorts of companies talking about collaboration, and it almost doesn't seem like two people are actually working together. It seems like one is doing something and someone else does something else to it, and someone else can download this. And we see a lot of people actually setting up different scenarios where, you know, they may put a multi-track on Dropbox, someone else downloads it, adds a part, they send their track back, and then it's, you know, someone may not like their existing part or may not like what they played, and then this whole process kind of has to start all over again. So it's really kind of, while there are tools for doing musical collaboration, you know, what makes collaboration unique is kind of that real-time interplay. So we introduced a technology called VST Connect, which would allow you to record people remotely online. So if they're in a different country or even in the same city and they just, you know, or they have transportation problems or whatever reason, they're not able to actually come to the particular area, or they don't want to move all their equipment, you could actually record them. And it used to be kind of a really tricky procedure to get set up previously. So I believe if you're really good, it could be just about 18 mouse clicks. So a lot of people would have to start off with a template. You needed to have like different tracks for monitoring for the other person, and then a different record track, and it was a bit convoluted, but all the kind of remote recording systems are. But we wanted to kind of simplify the process with the VST Connect 3. Now, how the VST Connect works is the performer doesn't actually have to even own a copy of Cubase. They could download a software program from our website called VST Connect Performer, and that's going to allow them to just simply define their audio interface. They don't have to be a Cubase user. They don't have to own Steinberg software, just an audio interface and like a source such as a guitar or a microphone, and they'd be able to actually just record directly in. Now, if they're just running on an iPad and they have an interface that will allow them to, you know, get a high quality audio in, such as our newly released UR12 or UR44 or UR28M or even the UR824, they could download the app, the VST Connect Performer, from the Apple Store, the App Store, for $5, so $4.99, and all you have to do now to set this up, and I would see all these people have really kind of convoluted ways, and they would all just kind of end up using the supplied template, which is great. But now we wanted to make this so much easier. So if you want to record someone, we could just have an audio track, At this point, we would go to our project menu and choose VST Connect. And we'll say we have the SE version. Now, there's an SE version that will allow you, that comes with Cubase, and that allows you to record 2 tracks of audio into your system. And there's a Pro version, which will allow you to record up to 16 tracks of audio. So now I could just say, oh, let's create a VST Connect. And what it's going to do is at this point, all you have to do is to set it up is you could just see, you type in your name, click on the little share icon. It's going to give you a code. At that point, you would tell the other person what that actual code is. They type it into their VST Connect Performer software. Again, that's a free download for Mac and PC and $5 for their iPad. You could actually see them on the webcam, which is really handy because if someone has, if they're like, you know, too close to the microphone or they're too far, they're kind of off access of the microphone or moving their head, you could actually see what's going on as opposed to worrying about, you know, what is actually coming down the signal path. So you hit record, the signal gets sent out to the musician with the VST Connect. So there's a direct connection. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to generate a password. You don't have to, you know, the password doesn't have to have, you know, 8 characters with one number, one special character that you're going to email 3 months later when you forget it. None of that nonsense. You just kind of simply have a direct connection with that musician. So you hit record, the signal, the mix goes out to the musician. They hear it in their headphones. At that point, they track, and this is, you know, depending on the speed of the internet connection, could be, you know, a few milliseconds, maybe 20, 30 milliseconds. So they would have that, you hear it kind of go out. They hear it with the latency automatically compensated for on their end. And at that point, they do the recording. It's then transmitted directly back into your timeline. And again, while these 3 events, when you hit record to when the person hears it and they perform to when it is recorded back into your system, are all slightly delayed, but all the latencies are compensated for. So at this point, you could just remotely record someone doing a lead vocal or voiceover or guitar solo from anywhere in the world as long as they have an internet connection. And really all you need is about 256K up. So you could have kind of a standard DSL line. So it doesn't have to be like a super fast broadband to do that. So, and then you could just simply record them and actually communicate with them over the webcam so that they have an idea of exactly what you want to have from the session. So this way you're not just, you know, doing file sharing and calling it collaboration. You could actually say, oh, I like this part, do this, change that. When you go into the bridge, I really like that chord voicing, but can you vary it going back into the verse after that? So you could actually kind of remotely collaborate with the different people. So it gets to be really kind of a compelling technology. So again, if we think about everything that we saw with the Cubase Pro 8, we're going to see, you know, significant performance increases. Again, kind of thinking of leaving the house but tearing down all the guts and redoing the guts software-wise so that you can have a lot of performance. We're going to see a lot of interface enhancements from the inspector to having the rack zones to being able to, you know, organize your plugins, to be able to have the workspaces, to have kind of really advanced rendering so that all of your VST tracks or audio could be rendered kind of as you see fit in kind of an intelligent way to free up resources when needed, or just be able to print those parts so you can hand it off to someone else. To kind of working with, you know, the chord pads. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, but you still want to be able to compose and come up with ideas and be able to have different guitar parts, to have the correct voicings, or if you're kind of in a harmonic rut, to try out, you know, to see what chords are related and which are closer, which are kind of a farther relation away, or have a circle of fifths so you can see kind of a musical relation between those. And to be able to try out those ideas and be able to trigger them from any MIDI keyboard or even using the virtual keyboard from your Cubase screen, whether you want to see it in a kind of a traditional piano keyboard or a drum grid layout, and be able to change the voicings, to change the tensions, to be able to actually record those different parts as if you had a full-blown MIDI keyboard if you're just working on a train or if you're just working late at night. on your laptop. So really great addition to be able to come up with new ideas for that. To having automatic tempo detection of not only audio like we've had in previous versions, but taking MIDI. So someone could take a rubato piano performance and actually just simply play it directly in and have it notate accurately, because you have that correlation between the bar and beat and the grid. And then going into the new virtual drumming aspect of it with the Groove Agent SE, the Acoustic Agent SE. So different patterns that you could vary. You could have halftime, real time, have it do fills, drag and drop your different patterns, all those different capabilities of being able to tweak the sounds, add more of the snare into the room, tune the kick, add 4 stages of 4 bands of parametric EQ, tape saturation, compression, all directly on the channel strip, plus 16 stereo outputs into your mixer for further processing as well. To going into the VST Bass Amp. So if you think about coupled with the VST Amp Rack, the great Acoustic Agent SE, the VST Bass Amp. And one of the other things that you'll see is lots of great content for, with Cubase 7.5, we introduced a lot of EDM content. So it's great for hip-hop and electronic dance music, but now there's a whole series of kind of pop rock construction songs. So you can take different bits and pieces and use it to kind of create your own song if you need to come up with something fast or just try out different ideas. To all of the mixing enhancements, so with additional plugins like the multiband envelope shaper, the multiband compressor, with live mode and multiple, each band having their own side channelable stage, with the multiband expander, the quadrafuzz version 2, the de-esser update, the tuner update, to being able to do all of your linking, whether you want a basic quick link, you want a defined link that can now be named and recalled, or full VCA linking. So however you need to do your linking for having all your channels work within your mix, we could do that. To the enhancements of the EQ, being able to define the pitch and have the frequency just magically appear, to saying, okay, now I want to have my channel strip enhanced where I can see all my EQ knobs. I can see all of my, and in addition to that, adding my de-esser as well in the tools. And again, with Magneto, that was added in version 7.5, so that you can have kind of a large format console experience without being kind of cluttered with traditional plug-in interface windows. To being able to do direct routing to wave meters, and of course being able to collaborate with all of your different people remotely using kind of the VST Connect SE, so making that easier and simpler so you could have a real effective collaboration versus file sharing. So as you can see, kind of everything that you see in Cubase Pro 8, there's a careful attention paid to detail and workflow. So when you start working with it, you work faster. You have the workspaces, just so you can just work exactly how you want to with a modern kind of interface enhancements for your multiple document interface, everything kind of going on. So not only do you have significantly increased performance, but you're going to have the capability of having everything kind of the workflow enhancements plus great new features. So as you can see, the Cubase Pro 8, they paid a considerable amount of attention to detail, great implementation of new features, and as you can see, it's features that people have been wanting and requesting. So you can see that how much that Steinberg is kind of listening to the user base and delivering just a really great update with Cubase Pro 8. I'm just going to take a quick look through some of the comments, see if we have questions that we can go through. I see a couple that have kind of come in. If you have questions as we go on, I'm going to go back and see if we could address some of the questions here. So feel free to ask some questions. And let me know, did you guys like the new features? I think it's a pretty great update. If you have questions, please enter them in the comments field. I'm seeing a question about hiding channels on the Mackie control unit. So I haven't worked with one in many years. I could look into that if you wanted to send me an email. I could see if I could get an answer about hiding the channels from the Mackie control unit. So we'll see. There's other questions I've kind of missed. All right, so we had a question from Duan about rendering in place and why it always comes out as stereo. The trick is, and it's kind of a workaround, I'll show you here what I do when I want in mono. So it kind of follows the mixer scheme. So if I wanted, we'll just open up one of the projects here. I activate this one. So the trick is you want to, it will kind of follow the signal path of the output of the mixer. So if you set it to a mono output, all you'd have to do is then instead of a stereo output, set it to a mono output, and then it'll just give you a mono file. So I did it here with this vocal in this project here, where I had all these different edits on my vocal. So I just chose to route it. So I just made a mono output in my VST connections. Still loading up some files. So make a mono output. It doesn't have to be physically routed anywhere. And then just simply, you could temporarily route that channel to a mono out. So again, that mono out doesn't have to be defined. And then when you do the render in place, it'll export it as a mono file. Yeah, so so we're seeing a couple questions. Yeah, just set it to a mono output, and that should do the trick. So you don't have to do the old method. The old methods still kind of work. All right, we'll hang out, see if we have more questions coming in. Our developers were kind of hard at work on this one, so I think they really kind of beefed up the coffee machine at the office. So whatever they're doing over there, they're doing something really great with kind of getting all these features implemented so fast. So I've seen a question from Renato about, was CPU ASIO performance improved on the Mac, particularly for VSTs, significantly? So you'll probably notice a huge increase on Mac OS X. So they kind of had a big breakthrough performance-wise with that. So if you're a Mac user, you're gonna, I was where we do kind of our Club Cubase enrichment. The guy has maybe a 4 or 5 year old Mac, and he was like, I'm really gonna have to get the new Mac Pro, which means getting all new interfaces. So it's kind of like one upgrade. And he was, since he got his Cubase Pro 8, and he does tons of commercials and jingles and records and a little bit of everything, film composing. He's just like, he's like, oh, it's like I got a brand new Mac and I didn't have to buy any new hardware. So you're going to see a really significant performance increase, especially on the Mac side. All right, so I've seen a question from LFFL about MIDI controls for Alan and Heath. One of the things that we, what you can do if you're trying to get a MIDI controller working, if you go to your device menu and go to your device setup, if it's transmitting MIDI, you could always just kind of come over here and have it work as a generic remote. You could do that. A lot of control surfaces also just kind of work as Mackie control. So that's a very common way of working with the different units as Mackie control. So your Allen and Heath, I haven't worked with one yet, but that may work as a Mackie control that you could set up. And then once you kind of have this set up, you could just say, okay, I'm using these ports. If it's a generic remote, you might just simply come here and define the MIDI ports and then just say, okay, this controller, and you could actually just do a MIDI Lauren is controlling this channel in the mixer, this controller is controlling that channel. So you can kind of get it set up, but let me just, I'm seeing a couple more comments come in about this. Yeah, so I'm seeing your question come in now, and sometimes there's a little bit of a delay from when you hear me to when it works. So if it works with Mackie control, which is a pretty common thing for controllers to work with, you might be able to have it work in a Mackie control mode for working that, or again, define it as a generic remote, and then you could use it as your control surface. Okay, so I see a question from Greg about is having multiple MIDI parts on one track. So I may actually have that set up. So let's say if I come here, like on my string part, and then wanting to be able to kind of separate that. So if I come here, I could actually see my different parts here as lanes. So here I have like 3 different lanes. Let me see if I go to another guitar part here, I might be able to also see. So you can see here, if I wanted these to be on different lanes, so this is a MIDI part, and then really all you have to do is just kind of, you could just drag it and copy it to any other track. So if you have everything kind of set up in lanes, and then let's say if I wanted to make a new MIDI track here, so I'll just say add a MIDI track. So you could just copy it from a lane directly to any other MIDI track, Greg. So, okay, so we had a question on adding a plugin folder. So this is one area that moved. So if we go to our plugin manager, you can just kind of click on the little settings right here in the lower left-hand corner, and then you can see your VST plugin paths directly here. All right, let's see if we have more questions coming in. Sorry, there's sometimes a little bit of a latency, so I'll wait just a little bit. So if you're watching this after and wonder why there's some delays, it could be sometimes 30 seconds from when I talk to when everyone else could hear. So I see a question from Greg about having a Yamaha digital keyboard for entering MIDI. Any reason to have a MIDI controller as well? If that's kind of meeting all of your needs, you know, as long as it's outputting MIDI, you know, obviously the Yamaha stuff's incredibly well made. We're lucky to kind of be within the Yamaha family, but that will. But you know, some people will get other MIDI controllers just for like having knobs and sliders to control virtual instruments. So if you're, but I see a lot of people that just have like a Yamaha PSR keyboard and they hook a MIDI cable out and then they're able to just, you know, play in parts and it's no problem. So if your Yamaha digital keyboard, Greg, is working for you, then you're all set. See a question from Ronaldo about if the video will be available on YouTube after it ends. Yeah, so all the Club Cubase meetings that we do, you could go back and you could watch all the different, you know, all of them online. So it's usually within a couple of hours, it's going to be placed online and you can watch it over and over and over again. So. Okay, seeing some of our questions coming in. Yeah, the chord pads are kind of fun. I'm just reading a question about the plugin manager. So the plugins, if you're not using it in the system, they don't take any memory. So if you have like 8,000 plugins just for Red In Studio, just because the plugin is on the system, it doesn't take memory. It's only going to take whatever hard disk space that the plugin takes, which is if it's not an instrument, generally pretty very, very small for the DLL or the plugin file. So it's not taking any memory when the app starts. So sometimes when you see the program starting and you see it like go through the plugins, often what it's doing is, and so the first time that you install a new version or after sometimes it's triggered by like a daylight savings time, it'll go through and just make sure that plugin is still kind of functioning, but it's not loading it up into memory. But the first time that you run it, it's actually will test the latency of each of the plugins as you're starting so that it can do all the delay compensation correctly. So it kind of scans the plugin to make sure that it's still working and functioning, but it doesn't load it into the computer's memory. So I'll go ahead and type in my email so you can send me about the Mackie control unit. So seeing Daryl's question here, I'm just going to type it in the field. Okay. All right. Well, I just entered it in, so you can email me personally. I'll send it off to our support guys. We'll see if there's more questions coming in. Okay, so we have a question on the chord pads about where to set the remote controls. So if I come here, let's say I open up a chord pad for this particular instrument. So we open up the chord pads right here. And then if you click on the edit, and then you click on, there's 3 tabs here. You'll see players, the pad layout, and the remote control. So here you could actually set the different, you could do a MIDI learn as well right here. So this is where you could set up which notes actually trigger the different remote control functions within the program. So once again, click on the edit key from it within the chord pads and go to the remote control tab. Oh, and here you might see the modifier. So if you want to do it with MIDI continuous controller messages versus a MIDI actual MIDI note, you could do that as well. So, all right, let's see if there's more questions coming in. If not, then we'll start to get it wrapped up. All right, so we'll hang out just a couple minutes. All right, so you use. So I see your question about this. So if you wanted to, for Redden Studio about plugins. So if you just come here to default, if you want to re-enable plugins, all you have to do is, I believe you could just come here to new collection, and you could just do a new collection and add all the plugins there, and that should add all the plugins in your system. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that pop up. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I hope that for those who are watching it live, we're a couple days before Christmas and New Year's, so I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. Hope everyone has safe travels and gets to have a great, relaxing time with family and friends. So we'll see if there's another question that just kind of pops up. If not, we'll wrap up. Again, thanks for checking out, and we do this just about every month, the Google Hangouts. So, if you have particular questions, you could just send it, that we go over. A lot of times we do kind of a standard Q&A where people ask just any question. So on any Steinberg product, occasionally when we have new release, we'll do like more of a overview, a feature overview of some of the new features. But we'll just, we'll just kind of, so if you have questions that you want answered in advance, we're happy to kind of, happy to answer all those. And, if there's particular topics you want covered, or if you don't understand this, or you want to understand this better or see this in more detail, please feel free to ask, and we'll be able to kind of go through all those different topics for you. You could ask in advance, is always helpful if I need to do a little bit of preparation, or you could just kind of ask in the comments field. I hope that everyone found this useful, and hope everyone has a great holiday, and we'll come back in January. I'll wait just a minute, see if there's any last minute questions. Okay, so I'm seeing a quick question from Greg about key editor controller section. Can this also be controlled using quick controls? Yeah, so if you have your quick control, let me just I'll create a quick MIDI track here. And say this is our new MIDI track, and we'll go to our quick controls. And I wanted to add, let's say, volume. And I'll just create a all right, so I think if I just kind of place this into record, let me just kind of move the volume here. Let me see if this automatically transfers over. I think you might be able to do this, but you can always just kind of automate the. Let me just see if I have volume automation here. If the quick control carries over. And let me just see if this is our... I could play with that a little bit more, Greg. But I think it could kind of line up, but this may be set up for the audio volume as opposed to just the MIDI volume. Yes, we do the live Club Cubase meeting in New York. So we'll be there January 8th. January 1st is the first. We usually do the first Thursday of the month, but we're doing January 8th because the 1st is the holiday. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for everyone for hanging out. Hope you find this useful. And if you have, again, topics that you want to see covered in future sessions, just please feel free to send a message to the channel. And you can let other friends know about this too. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you could do that. There should be some more tutorials coming up over the holidays here with a little bit of downtime from travel. So thank you very much. And again, hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in January. Good night.